Hello and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. I am Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. I am the founder and the spiritual director. Now, as you are sitting there joining us, you may have questions, any number of questions, such as, who am I? How did I get here? Spiritually integrated arts means what exactly? What is a teaching center? Well, what is Centers for Spiritual Living? What is that? What does that even mean? Or New Thought, or religious science, or science of mind and spirit? You may have any number of questions about this specific community, about the parent organization, CSL, our philosophy, our teaching, our liberation theology. Any number of questions. Feel free to send an email. We look forward to connecting more and building our virtual community, our global community. And if you haven't connected yet on social media, feel free to do so. This is your invitation now. Also, did you know that all of our Sunday messages are archived on our YouTube channel? You can watch it anytime. Now, questions about anything, such as becoming a member. What does that mean? What does membership entail? And if you live somewhere far and already belong to a spiritual community, can you be a member of more than one? The simple answer is yes, you can. Just like you can shop at more than one grocery store, you can attend or be a member of more than one gym. We are building beloved community. So you can do both. You can be a member of both. You can be involved with both. That's what being in spiritual community means. So we welcome you. We invite you. We are so appreciative that you have found this community and that you have joined us today. We bless you. We love you. We welcome you. Live long and prosper. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of our Sunday message. Love you. Connect with you soon. Blessings.
Namaste and greetings. Yes, as you can see, since today's discussion, today's lesson, let's talk about sex, baby. Of course, I decided to wear the sexy shirt. It's going to be one of those days. Hope y'all ready. Okay, let's jump in. We are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience that we call our human experience. And this spiritual / human experience includes pleasure. Say it again. It includes pleasure as well. Due to our past or possibly current indoctrination, we have equated our human experience as somehow less than our spiritual one. Didn't Meister Eckhart say, between me and God, there is no between? So our human experience is our spiritual experience. They are one and the same. I digress. We have dehumanized ourselves. We have invalidated our bodies through this idea of moralizing, of completely natural experiences and processes. We've deemed some things more appropriate and other things more, or let's say there's the sacred and the holy, and there's the secular and the mundane. We should be striving for the sacred and the holy, not this other stuff to pitter around about. For that is not. The flesh is sinful. As a result of this moralization of, we have denied ourselves the pleasure of having this human body. And not only have we denied, but we have lumped upon ourselves great shame for the desires and for the experiences and for the pleasures, all of which are natural. They're natural. And not only are they natural, they are life-affirming and life-sustaining. They are nurturing and supportive to our divine nature. So if we're ready, today is a day to return to the awareness of our wholeness, our perfection, our completeness. Understanding that we need not ever deny our bodies or our pleasures in order to have access and connection to spirit. Breathe. Adrienne Marie Brown says, I touch my own skin, and it tells me that before there was any harm, there was miracle. Take that in. Before there was any harm, whether physical harm, emotional harm, psychological harm, before the harm that conditioned us to deny our bodies, our pleasures, etc., there was miracle. And that which it is still present. Are we ready to access and live from that place of miracle? So now, today's theme, generally it says, we're supposed to be talking about sex, but we're going to talk about sex slightly differently because this isn't a biology class. So there's no need for us to go into all of that stuff. But I do want to talk about the meaning of sex in terms of sex, meaning the spiritual evolution of the both and. You got that? The spiritual evolution, S, spiritual evolution E, both and, X. Okay? Keep this in mind as we continue through the rest of today's lesson. Sex, the spiritual evolution of the both and. That means precisely where that both and intersect is the place that the treasure resides. And if the treasure resides there, then we can be sexcellent. Like, let that sink in. The spiritual evolution of our both and shows up in our excellence. It shows up in our experience. It shows up as we experiment with this thing called life. How does this idea of our spiritual evolution of the both and, how do we allow it to show up? Like, it's already there. So when we talk about jargon, when we talk about allowing it, what we are saying is we are opening ourselves to be present to it. Humanity, both and, divinity. That awareness makes our sexcellence a lived reality. Body, both and, spirit. That awareness and that boldness to step into that and live from that changes the entire way that we live this thing called life. See, because when we are willing to do this, we understand our sacredness and how it shows up in our humanness, and vice versa. We understand how we can feel grief and joy in the same moment. We need not deny the grief or the sadness in order to access joy. Someone recently made a comment saying that fear and faith cannot exist in the same space or at the same time. I don't agree. Fear in and of itself is not bad. Take that in. If someone is in a burning building and they are afraid because the natural biology of their organism, their system, fear is going to show up. You're not going to sit in a burning house calmly saying, well, the house is on fire. Let me dial 911. Hello, my name is Raymond Anderson. I live at such and such Mockingbird Lane. I'm calling to request firefighters, for my house is burning down, and there is smoke inhalation starting to affect me. At your earliest convenience, please. No, there is a sense of urgency. While also I can have the faith knowing that the firefighters are going to rescue me. Fear and faith can't exist in the same space. Both and. Now the question is, are we referring to non-life affirming fear and faith or life affirming fear and faith? Which one are we referring to? Nonetheless, yin, both and, yang. The masculine and the feminine. You and I are both of these at the same time. We are not talking about being a man and a woman. That's not what yin yang is referring to. It is the energy of, for example, when someone compliments you and you receive and accept the compliment, that is yin, the negative aspect of yin yang. When you receive the compliment, you are engaging in negative energy. Now, I know normally we refer to negative as the bad. Once again, that's because we have gone down the spiral of jargon, which is the same thing we have done with sex by vilifying it. If we are going to have a sexcellent life, then we are invited to step fully into the both and. Now, when we talk about sex, let's talk about sex, baby. No, sorry. Sorry, Deidre. The Greeks reference this idea of sex via eros, which is the root of the word erotic. But before we get there, the word connects to, in Greek mythology, the god of love, passion, fertility. Eros, the god of, represents all aspects of love, desire, etc. As the son of Aphrodite, who is the Greek goddess of love, beauty, and desire, he is the archetype of these things. Now, what does that have to do with you? Well, as you, as a divine incarnation of God, Dr. Holmes reminds us whatever is true of God is true of you. So whether it's this archetype or not, you are invited to say, how do I demonstrate love, love of myself and love of others? How do I embody the archetype of Eros? What am I passionate about? And what is the evidence of this passion? How does fertility show up in my life? How fertile am I regarding artistic creations, life-affirming ideas and imaginings, conversations, etc.? How do I attract beauty into my life? How do I project or express beauty into life? How do I desire to be, to do, and to have? See, so when we talk about mythology, mythology isn't some fake made up blah, 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 just stories to tell. Mythology, because they're stories, represent truths. And so our invitation is, how and what can we extrapolate from the mythology, from the stories? This is why one of the things I'm teaching this month in August, starting this month in August, we started August 5th, was storytelling as a spiritual practice of finding one's self. Because the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories we tell others, the stories that are told to us have an impact in our lives. So the stories we've been told about eros and erotic and eroticism, all of these things have an impact on us. What is your concept? What is your mental equivalent as it relates to this idea of sexuality, sexual feelings, etc.? Do you vilify them? Do you consider them bad or unholy or whatever word? Is that where you tend to go with it? Because as we teach in our philosophy and in this theology, is that God is all there is. And if we are made in the image and likeness of that which God is, then everything that we feel has been, quote unquote, created to serve a purpose. It has often been referenced that the major erogenous zone that humans have, it's not sexual organs, it's your skin, period. That's why hugging is vital to not just survival, but being able to thrive. It has been said that there's a certain number of hugs we should have per day to just maintain our emotional and psychological stability. And anything less than that starts to cause imbalances. Above that, we are now able to thrive. See, so sex, eros, the erotic, isn't just about quote unquote sex. It's about how we experience love, how we experience beauty, how we protect and preserve this thing called life, how the creative impulse of the universe moves in, through, and as us. So knowing this, what do we do? What is our invitation? How do we change stuff? Well, let's first look at, generally, due to our indoctrination, we vilify eros and erotic by referencing, it's carnal. Like there are a variety of synonyms that are used. Lewd. There are a variety of synonyms that are used to describe what it means to be engaged in non-life affirming energy, erotic, sexual, etc. So our first invitation is, let's stop doing this. Let's stop seeing it as dirty and gross, etc. Let's swap this out for more life affirming references and terms that eros, erotic, sexual, sex, spiritual evolution of both and, in life affirming ways, joyfulness, bliss, right? How do we start to swap these out? And specifically, note that word, heaven. Why? Because what did Dr. Holmes say in our Declaration of Principles? We believe that heaven is within us, and not just like inside our body, but within that which is consciousness, within us, and that we experience it to the degree that we are conscious, that we become conscious, that we engage our consciousness of it. So the invitation is to be more conscious and mindful of the words and the feelings and the emotions that we associate with all of this in life affirming ways. That's how we evolve. Dr. Holmes says, Science of Mind proclaims the spiritual nature of humankind. It removes non-life affirming fear by introducing life affirming love. It places us in, quote unquote, the mind of God as some part of the eternal wholeness. Because we can't step outside of that which is wholeness. Because if we could step outside of God, if we could be separate from God, then God can't be whole. There can't be an infinite wholeness if I can take a piece out of it. Okay? So, referencing this wholeness as spiritual beings, having a spiritual experience, we're invited to say, well, how does sexuality and spirituality, how do they intersect? How does shame and spirituality, how do they intersect? Guilt, our denial of joy and pleasure, how do these things intersect? Because if our spirituality isn't addressing these things, then our spirituality is not worth anything. It's simply metaphysical masturbation, because it gives us a pseudo pleasure of avoiding and denying the uncomfortable rather than stepping full in and addressing the uncomfortable. Because when we ask the question, what is sexy? Once again, spiritual evolution of the both and of you. That's sexy. The both and of you, the spiritual evolution of the both and of you, which means healing is sexy. Engaging in healing practices is sexy. Dr. Holmes goes on to say, through a conscious acceptance of the fullness of the presence of God, there flows in and through us and as us a joy, a love, and a wholeness that touches every part of our being. You got that? Every part of our being. Which means we cannot segment and separate Tupperware, compartmentalize, well, this is sacred and this is not. This is holy and this is not. This is of God and this is not. Because Oppenheimer creating the bomb is still God. Oppenheimer, an individualized expression of God, used his mind, which is the mind that is God, to create. Creation is God. This device, which is made of God, all God. Now, what it was and what it did had a non-life affirming effect, but it still existed as a result of the same spiritual practices and principles that create peace and medicine and healing. There is no separation. And yet, when we somehow think there is, fear and faith cannot exist when we separate them as though they cannot exist in the same, we're actually denying ourselves the full range of our power to actually create a world that works for all. Because we are now denying certain aspects of the wholeness that touches every part of our being. So when we are willing to really get grounded and really get centered and understand that there is this very interesting experiment called life, that we are far more able to understand that joy is sexy, love is sexy, wholeness is sexy, because that which God is shows up in, through, and as it touches every part of our life. Well, why though? Because we are so intimately connected with the universal creative God power that it is impossible to get away from it. How fast do you think I would have to run to get away from being a black man? Like if I run 4,000 miles an hour, will I become a white woman? Like, can I run and get away from? No. It is part of, it is who I am and what I am in this incarnation. It is impossible to get away from it. It is impossible to get away from God. Hence, we never have to wonder whether or not we are in touch with it. Remember what I said about Oppenheimer? We are always in touch with it. We can't help but to be. It is where we are. It is what we are. It is in us, and we are in it. It is all around us. It is flowing through us, and it is showing up as us. Because between you and God, there is no between. If I were to ask, can you make fire wet and water fire? Like, can you swap the attributes of, so instead of drinking water to stay hydrated? Can you drink fire to hydrate? When you go camping and you want to get warm at night and cook a meal, can you use the flint and whatnot and start a water instead of a fire? There are certain attributes that are native, quote unquote, inherent in the element. And in the same way that we talk about this intimacy, these attributes, God, exist in, through, and as you as well. You cannot separate or try as much as you want. You can try to be something else. Like fire can try to be water, but it's not. Water can try to be fire, but it's not. So as much as you attempt to be whatever that is, your nature, your divine attributes are still that which God is. You are still one within the one. There is infinite and absolute oneness, which includes you in it, me in it. No matter how many we're in it, it's in us. That makes oneness sexy. The realization that there is no escaping God. The realization that the sacredness, the holiness that is true of God is true of you. That oneness is sexy. Adrienne Marie Brown reminds us, I actually consider myself a pleasure activist and not a hedonist. A hedonist is someone whose goal is to experience as much pleasure as possible, simply for the sake of, I want to enjoy, I want to feel pleasure. A pleasure activist, on the other hand, is someone whose goal is to increase the amount of pleasure people in the world experience. Goes back to the idea that I shared about metaphysical masturbation. That's hedonism. That's so I feel good. There's no such thing as racism. If you don't want to experience racism, don't think about it. Don't talk about it. And in that, I feel pleasure. By denying that and that and that, I feel good. Whereas a pleasure activist, a true liberation theologist, doesn't just want to be free for themselves. Harriet Tubman just doesn't want to be free for themselves. Frederick Douglass. They understand that my freedom is to be in service to liberating others. A pleasure activist to liberate others that they may feel pleasure as well. She goes on to say, since I am a person in the world, it follows too that I strive to experience pleasure, but I also try to help others experience pleasure, even if it means giving up some opportunities for my own pleasure. Go back to Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman, she got away to the north. Great, free. Yes, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, she's free at last. Warm bed, great food, come and go as she pleased. But there were times that she said, I must give up this warm bed, great food, the ability to come and go as I please, and I must go back into the belly of the beast to help others. She sacrificed her own comforts in this moment to go help others be liberated. When we sacrifice our comfort to engage in challenging and conflicting, controversial conversations, etc., we are being part of the healing process. We are bringing pleasure, which is liberation, to others. Pleasure is a feeling of happy satisfaction, being able to be in joy. Happiness, pleasure. Delight, pleasure. Joy, pleasure. All of these things are other words for pleasure. So when you are happy, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. That means you are in a state of pleasure. Are you amused? We go to amusement parks. We could very easily call them pleasure parks. Six Flags is a pleasure park. Disney is a pleasure park. We go to these things to be amused, to be in joy, to laugh and have fun. It's pleasure. Once again, that means it's sexy. Pleasure and enjoyment is sexy. Having fun is sexy. Laughing is sexy. Now, there are those who laugh at things that are non-life affirming, people who use comedy like Dave Chappelle to punch down on transgender people and such. That form of comedy and laughing at that, not very life affirming, not very, right? So that's not sexy. But laughing, recently I saw a video, someone did a voiceover. It was a dog outside of a sliding door. And the owner, I'm assuming, was telling the dog, don't you dare, don't you lick my window. And the dog starts licking the window, and the voiceover, it was hilarious. It was just funny. That's pleasure. That's enjoyment. That's laughter. And it is sexy. Are you willing to engage in these activities that are sexy? Are you willing to have a mental equivalent that is sexy? Adriana says, many lovers are off to the races, hurling themselves toward orgasm, and they miss the excitement of sensual meanderings along the way. Now, we know this very often is we are so focused on the destination. Are we there yet? That the children cannot enjoy the journey from point A to point B. I just want to get there. I want to get to the airport, get on the plane, get in the air, get to the airport, get off I want to get there. Versus, well, pause. Orgasm shouldn't be the goal, because once again, that makes someone a hedonist. Simply pleasure for the sake of pleasure. And it becomes a new drug. Part of the enjoyment of watching a race, for those who like the Olympics and track and field, is watching the neck and neck. If it was automatic, on your marks, get ready, get set, go, and it was done, then you saw the person standing on the other side of the ribbon, you didn't see the run. But what? What's the part of the enjoyment in watching any sport is this team got a touchdown. They got another touchdown. Now, who's going to get? It's part of you enjoy the process. So shouldn't we also enjoy the process when it comes to literal orgasm or the orgasmic bliss of writing a book, the process of painting a landscape, the process of being in college to become an interpreter, the process of. Yes, you want to get to the point where I am now a professional interpreter. Now I am a MD. But can you also enjoy the process? So Archimedes said the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And yet, there are many scientists who have proven that actually is not 100% correct. A straight line is usually the shortest distance, but there are caveats. So if I were to ask you, in reference to this, if I were to ask you, in New York City, Manhattan, what are the ways that you can get from point A to point B? Right? If we were starting at the red circle and we want to get to the green plus, what are some of the ways that we could get there? There's a variety. We could take a cab, subway, bus, taxi, or walk. Several years ago, when I was attending Juilliard, I chose to I chose to get from that red circle area to that green plus. Now, based on Archimedes, the path would have probably or should have been that. Because, that's according to Archimedes. That's as close to a straight line as one could get, basically, in essence, to a certain degree. Do you think that's the path I took? Not even close. This is the path I took. Now, why though? You see all of it. Now, why? Why would I take 13, whatever hours it took, 12 hours, 4 days, 9 minutes, and 16 seconds, whatever, to go through that long roundabout, chicka chicka woo woo woo, chicka woo 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 woo, circle back, go forward, go down, go over? Why? To enjoy the journey, to sightsee, to visit, to explore, to engage in a Manhattan experiment of what does the city look like? What does it feel like? That's part of this amazing thing called life. To engage in the process of enjoying it. Because, see, walking that path in and of itself becomes a form of meditation. Taking photos is a form of focusing, becoming mindful of, and choosing what I want to be present to, which is sexy. Being present, being here now is sexy. When we know what science of mind and spirit is, we practice it and we live it as a way of life. We not only understand our wholeness, our perfection and completeness, we understand the connection pleasure has to our lives. We no longer deny pleasure or invite suffering as a faux requirement for our salvation and healing. Because many people still to this day, even in New Thought, suffering teaches us a lesson in order for us to be. We understand and we embody what it means to live, move, and have our being in orgasmic bliss, where we laugh so hard we cry. We enjoy the simplest of pleasures and are in joy. And by simplest, what I am referring to is feeling a cool breeze on a hot day, watching dogs at play, drinking your favorite beverage while reading a good book. Simple refers to finding pleasure in your regular, everyday activities and enhancing the quality of life, individually and collectively. It need not be complicated. And from this place of orgasmic bliss, power, and purpose, we are far more capable and ready to create the sexiest thing of all, a world that works for all. This week's affirmation or declaration, I will say it first. And if it resonates with you, say it with me on the second go round. I am a sexy spiritual being. What? Together. I am a sexy spiritual being. You know what? This isn't sufficient enough for me. I mean, it's cool, but I want to swap it out. I am a spiritually sexy being. Yeah, together. I am a spiritually sexy being because that is sexy. This week's journal questions or the study group on Thursday night questions. Number one, what is pleasurable to me? How often do I allow myself to experience pleasures of various types, be it taste, be it touch, be it emotional, intellectual? Number two, in what areas of my life does shame or guilt creep in as it relates to sex, pleasure? What have I convinced myself is needed for me to feel worthy of experiencing the good parts of life? What do I need to do to earn the right to experience pleasure? And this is based on our indoctrination. We have been convinced that we need to earn it. So based upon what do I feel like I need to do to earn it? Number three, looking back into my past, what was I taught to think about sex? What was I taught to think about pleasure, enjoyment? What would it mean for me to have a healthy sex life now? And we can look at sex life now as both physical, actual, the sex act, intercourse. What would it mean for me to have a healthy sex life now? And we can look at sex as what would it mean for me to have a healthy spiritual evolution of the both and now? Look at it both ways. Do I desire to even have a healthy sex life? If not, why not? If yes, what could I do to create it? Lastly, and if not physical sex, what about a life of sacred sexuality? What would that entail? And we breathe. Stepping into this space of prayer, which is sexy, which is enjoyable, which is pleasurable, which is bliss inducing and enveloping. Simply being able to declare that which is true about each and every person is sexy. It enhances this thing called life, our quality of life. And in enhancing our quality of life, we are far more able to act, to serve, to behave in ways that not only liberate us as individuals, but liberate all of life. Create a world that works for all. And so as I anchor into this truth, as I anchor into this energy, knowing oneness is sexy and wholeness is sexy. Pleasure is sexy. Healing is sexy. I must also acknowledge that liberation is sexy. And so it becomes my mission, vision, and purpose to engage in the sex act of liberation daily, so that I, as an individual, experience the orgasm of freedom. As a pleasure activist, I also ensure that others experience their own orgasm of liberation and freedom. that they too are able to cry out, "Oh my God, I am free at last, free at last. Thank all that is sacred, holy, and powerful as truth. I am free at last. We are free at last. A world that works for all at last." And it means this healing power and presence, this sexiness, spreads to everyone and everything. That means when we encounter opposition from such folks as the Heritage Foundation, the energy we know to be true dissolves their energy of oppression, suppression, enslavement. In other words, by us anchoring and acknowledging that we are pleasure activists, we are liberation theologists, liberation metaphysicians, our consciousness, our prayers, our meditations, our life heals the collective consciousness that they are drowning in. Breathe. Knowing this is sexy and powerful and life-inducing, we sow these seeds, these words, into the law, this fertile soil of the universe, knowing that as these seeds are sown, the universe responds accordingly. We receive back unto us exactly what we have prayed, exactly what our mental equivalent is anchored, aligned with, and grounded in. It cannot come back to us void and absent. It comes back to us as answered prayer. So we receive that. And we continue to do what is ours to do. Knowing that this is done, knowing that this entire lesson has shifted and helped us to evolve into that greater next level of, and that greater next level of, and that greater next level of, for we are forever open at the top and open at the bottom, evolutionary beings of liberation. And that our life is our amen. I know it is already done. It is already answered prayer. It is already so. And so it is. So it is. Namaste and blessings, everyone. Chat with you soon. What's today? Do we have Zoom? I don't remember. I don't remember. It's a good question. I don't remember if today is our interpreter. If we go back and look at if we have Zoom today, I'll see you in Zoom. And if we don't, I'll see you later in the week, or I will see you next Sunday. Love and appreciate you.